Welcome to IE's Interactive Interview. Our subject this month is Bob Bates, president of Legend Entertainment, publishers of Companions of Xanth, Deathgate, and the upcoming Mission Critical.
I had a friend who knew a lot about computers. I knew absolutely nothing about computers. And the two of us started a company called Challenge in order to write games to compete with Infocom. Challenge actually I became Infocom's first outside developer, outside writer, other than Douglas Adams, who worked with Steve Maretsky on Hitchhikers. I hired two programmers named Dwayne Beck and Mark Pesch, who worked for a small company called Paragon Systems, which was owned by a guy named Mike Verdu. And this was a small programming for services firm. And so Dwayne and Mark became my conduit to the Infocom system. I knew nothing about programming or the system at all. Sherlock, the Riddle of the Crown Jewels. I made a big mistake when I programmed Sherlock, when I did Sherlock. And that is that I put one of the most difficult puzzles in the game near the beginning of the game. And that was not a very bright thing to do, because a lot of people couldn't get by it. I like looking at those old products because to some extent they were written to please me. There was as much fun in trying to figure out what the game was smart about and what they had thought to answer to questions as it was in solving the puzzles. Solving the puzzles was a big part of it, but just the idea that there was like a little guy inside that computer who was talking to you was a very neat thing for me. If there's a moment-to-moment enjoyment of the world, if I feel that I'm talking to somebody, if I feel that I'm in connection, if I feel that I'm in communication with another mind, with another person, then that is a real success for me as a game player. Obviously, you want to have a sense of being grounded in the story. You want to know where you are right now. You want to have a goal sort of just in front of you that you're kind of working on right now, that you know is going to lead to a goal sort of a little bit further down the way, which you know is going to lead towards the grand conclusion of the game. When a player is playing a game and he's trying to solve puzzles, a lot of the times the things that he tries don't work. And so you have to entertain him while he's trying those things that don't work. And the easiest way for me to do that as a game author is through humor. He was tired of doing the spellcasting series, and so he decided he wanted to do the Superhero League of Hoboken, which is a role-playing game. It's our first role-playing game, and it is a comedy role-playing game, which you don't see many of. When I do a game, I want to be the little guy that's inside the computer for the guy who's playing the computer. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about that other guy. The thing that you can always rely on from a Legend game is that there's going to be a good, logical story that makes sense with interesting characters in a neat place where fun stuff happens. We did Gateway, and Gateway was really the next commercial success. It was a license from Frederick Pohl novel, and was a big success for us. It has some of the sort of the hallmarks of Legend products these days, in that it's a good license. Glenn Dahlgren wrote a great story, did really good puzzles. We have a good-looking game box, and real advances in technology. What we wanted to do is keep writing adventure games, but keep writing them with pretty pictures and good sound effects and interesting musical scores, and to involve the player in lots of different ways, in ways that Infocom games traditionally hadn't involved the player. Certainly. We felt that a large portion of the adventure game market, and adventure games continue to be popular through that period of time, and we felt that a segment of that market was really kind of hankering for our kind of game, and that it just wasn't available. And when we brought out our first game, it was a very successful game, and we felt, by God, we were right. I have a horrible memory. And so from time to time, when family or friends are coming by and they want to see something, and I'll boot up one of the old games, and it's almost as if I'm playing it anew because I don't remember stuff. And so I'll say, gee, well, I wonder what will happen if you try this. I don't mind that a game looks great. It's very nice for a game to look great, but for me that's not primary. For me, it's primary, as I say, that from moment to moment, that my interactions with the game are rewarded, and that I feel like there's an interaction going on there. I don't have the visual sense that a lot of our designers and other folks here at Legend have. I'm probably the least visual guy at Legend, but we have people here to whom visuals are enormously important. And those people are doing games. And so they're saying, look, this has got to look great, this interface has got to be playable. We were very concerned that the interface itself would prohibit us from doing in-depth storytelling or good puzzles. And we discovered that that, in fact, was not the case. We were able to build the interface in such a way that we were able to keep doing the things that we like to do. Xanth brought in a younger group of game players than we had had before, and it broadened our market considerably. Xanth is by far our best-selling game to date, and it is still selling extremely well in the marketplace. In our business, the way a game looks has become of enormous importance. And so our challenge at Legend has been to do great-looking games that nevertheless are really good story games. We believe that the way that players could have the most interaction with the world that we created was to give them complete freedom of input, or as complete as a moderate English language parser can manage. Really, the guy who pulled all this off was Michael Lindner. He did a great job. He developed the game and the engine more or less simultaneously, and more or less on his own. This is still a gee whiz biz. It's a business where people like to have new technological features in their products, and so we try in each of our products to have new features. Legend almost never stands still. The next big step forward for us was Companions of Xanth. And the biggest thing there was the abandonment of the parser interface. We moved to a point-and-click interface. When he and Mark were sitting down and designing spaceships, they were saying, well, it has to look this way because it's got to survive these forces as it enters a gravitational field. And I was looking at the drawings and saying, well, just make it look cool. And they said, no, you can't just make it look cool. It's got to work, too. It's got a real subtext to it that we don't beat people over the head with, but there are interesting themes running through it and important themes running through it. So I was a novelist and a freelance magazine writer, working on a book, and it was going okay. And the day came when I realized that to make a lot of money off of a book was a very difficult thing to do, and in fact I couldn't support myself doing that because writers typically don't make a lot of money. I had gotten a computer to use as a word processor while writing the book, and with that computer my dad gave me a copy of a game called Zork. And I played Zork and said, oh, I like this a lot. Maybe I can write games like this. I've always been a game player. I grew up in a large family, 8 kids in our family, and we all played games all the time. And the idea that there would be a game that you could talk to and it could talk back to you was a very compelling thing. It was a very neat thing. Through the years, I gradually learned more and more about the programming of it myself, and actually came to a point after some years where I was actually committing programming, the sin of programming. My second game for Infocom was King Arthur, The Quest for Excalibur. I have a few unfortunate distinctions. I wrote the last all-text game that was ever done, which was Sherlock. And then I also wrote the last ZIL game ever done, which was Arthur, The Quest for Excalibur. Spellcasting 101, Sorcerers Get All the Girls, written by Steve Moretsky. We've done 4 games with Steve, and we're talking with him about doing a 5th game. There's not currently an agreement between us to do a 5th game, but by golly, we're talking about it. When we started Legend, I didn't realize that some of the realities of the marketplace are that new game publishers have a lot of difficulty getting into the marketplace, getting into the channel, getting into Egghead and Software Etc. and Babbage's and Electronics Boutique. So we formed an alliance with Microprose, who actually distributed our products, and that solved some of those problems. I think one is fantasy, one is science fiction, and one is comedy. Those are Legend's strengths in terms of our genres. And of course, comedy can exist in science fiction or fantasy. So when you get a comic fantasy like the Spellcasting games or Eric the Unready, you have a nice opportunity for some of our strengths to come together. This is really the brainchild of Mike Verdu. He has done a wonderful job of envisioning a world and directing art in a way that made this world come to life in just a beautiful and fascinating way. We have a spaceship that's been modeled, completely modeled and rendered, and you wander around the spaceship, fixing it, repairing various systems on it, and having an adventure game in a modeled environment. So where I think we're going to be is doing good stories, frequently licensed from existing authors, from some of the best-selling fantasy and science fiction authors in the world, and also doing original stories as well. So, but always with an eye towards telling good stories and entertaining audiences in an interactive way.